Welcome to Speaking of Timmins. On this edition, we welcome Mayor-elect Steve Black. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Mayor-elect Steve Black to the show this evening. Steve, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So please share with our viewers a little bit of what your election day was like. Did you have polling that said you had a healthy lead, and how did you experience your day? What was a day like for you?
Well, you do your polling throughout the campaign, so we had a good feeling, but you never really want to put too much trust in the polls. You got to wait for election day and see the results. So there's always a bit of nerves as you're waiting with the team and hoping things go as you're thinking and hoping they are. It was a pretty long day. Obviously, you wake up early, and it's the last official day of the campaign too. So you got things to do and people in the office, and we were coordinating and giving people rides, so you had to take care of that. But all in all, it went pretty well.
Were you at all surprised by the margin of victory on election day?
Well, as I said, our polling numbers are pretty strong throughout the campaign, but we finished even slightly ahead of our own internal polling numbers, so it was a bit of a surprise. Obviously, Councillor Lever and myself had been fairly aligned the last 4 years, so there was a lot of talk about it being a very close race, and didn't turn out that way in the end. But I give him full respect for the campaign he ran and putting his name forward too.
I was just wondering if you received any interesting calls either on election day or the day following that you'd like to share with our viewers.
Well, election night, there wasn't too many. Obviously, the Mayor Loughran called me and congratulated me after the results were officially in, and then the other councillors and myself exchanged phone calls throughout the night. The next day, there's a few calls that were kind of interesting. The first one that I received was from former Mayor Jamie Lim, who congratulated me, but also was a little disappointed that her youngest mayor record was broken, but we had a good chat, and obviously she's doing a lot of work now in the forestry industry, so we agreed to sit down over lunch sometime soon and discuss some of the issues in the forestry industry and how I can help them and what they can do up here as well. Joe Bisson also called me and congratulated me. I heard from Patrick Brown, who's a federal MP, Norm Miller, who's a provincial MPP, Charlie Angus called the following day, so there's a lot of people that reached out. Mayor Spacek sent me a text the night of the election congratulating me, and we'll be in touch again soon with him talking about some of the issues we have up here in northeastern Ontario, because obviously him and Mayor Loughran work fairly close together on a lot of the regional committees and a lot of the work that we've done up here over the last 4 years.
So, having won 2/3 of the votes, or having garnered 2/3 of the vote on election day, many people are saying that now this gives you a clear mandate. What does having a mandate mean to you, if anything, and how do you anticipate that will play out over the coming days, months, and throughout your term?
Well, I mean, I think it was very reassuring and nice to have a win by that margin. I mean, I campaigned on a few topics, which I'm meeting with all the council one-on-one on Monday just to discuss what my vision of the community is going forward and seeing how theirs lines up. But, I mean, as far as mandates go, you are the one voice in the nine sitting around the council table, so you need to make sure you have the team that wants to be on board with that mandate. I mean, if you look at last term, I always reference the Sudbury scenario where you had a mayor who won, who ran on a platform, but if you don't have the council on the same page, then it doesn't matter what your personal vision or mandate was. You have to work together as a team, and that's what I plan on doing, and hopefully we'll get off on the right foot Monday morning when we start sitting down and meeting.
What are the one or two key priorities that you plan on tackling immediately once you are sworn in?
Well, I think the first thing that this council is going to have to tackle just by timing and when it comes out, and it did come up in the one debate, and Councillor Lever and I were on the same page during the debate, and we've been trying to push this issue forward for the last 2 or 3 years, is our water and sewer rates. Obviously, we're taking on a lot of debt with the new sewage treatment plant, and it's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money over the next few years, so I would like to sit down with council and try and come up with a better plan there, then hopefully save some money on that interest. I mean, I've looked at various plans, and there might be a little compromise, but at the one side, if we take a fairly aggressive side, we can save up to $8 million in interest payments on that loan. So I think that's something that we have to do as a community, but I have to discuss with council and see if they're on the same page and want to tackle that one. And then the second issue that we're obviously going to jump into fairly quickly is the 2015 budget. So we're going to have a few orientation meetings just to get council into the flow of things over the next month, and then I'm sure one of the first items we jump into after we have our initial couple of meetings there will be the 2015 budget and getting that started. So I got a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions with staff for how we're going to approach that, and then we'll bring the rest of council on board.
There was a lot of talk during the campaign about the city looking into the possibility of outsourcing policing services to the OPP. Can you clarify your position on this and let us know how you may deal with this issue once you're sworn in?
Well, I think throughout the campaign, I said I'm very in favor of the community police service that we do have with Timmins Police Service. I believe they offer a lot of services that you don't get out of the core service provisions of the OPP. But I did mention that it's important to look at the cost, and we will look at the cost. Obviously, the cost numbers have been coming out over the last few months, and it is something to be looked at when they're thrown out there. So it's to be duly diligent to our taxpayers. We got to look at it, but as I said during the campaign, the cost that's been provided by the OPP so far is just the base cost, and then there's a cost per service call. So a lot of the smaller communities, when they're looking into this and taking advantage of it, they don't have that many service calls. When you look at a town like Cochrane, the population under 5,000 compared to City of Timmins, where we have 45,000, we get up to 26,000 calls to our Timmins Police Service each year. So we got to really determine what that cost per service call is first, factor that in and get the real cost comparison, and then you really have to break down the cost in the Timmins Police Service because, as I mentioned during the campaign, we spend $1.5 million on dispatch for fire and paramedics throughout the region because we service several municipalities, but we also get that money returned to us through the Ministry of Long-Term Care. They give us a $1.5 million grant for providing that service. So although it's in the budget and it shows up as a cost, it's really a zero cost to the taxpayers of Timmins because it's funded by the provincial government. So you really have to pull those items out of the Timmins Police Service costs and then compare the apples to apples because regardless of which police service we use, we're still going to have to dispatch our own fire and paramedic services within the region, so those costs are still there. So we really have to pull things apart and look at things and then really look into programs that I mentioned like DARE and some of the outreach programs and community programs that Timmins Police Service offers. Decide if you still want to continue those if you were to switch to OPP and find out what they would charge for those extra costs that aren't included in their base cost scenario. So I am willing to look at the costs, as I said, but I'm fully supportive of our local police service and do believe that after reviewing it, we will most likely continue with the Timmins Police Service for years to come. You also have to look at the downside risk, as I mentioned, when the OPP negotiated a contract to be the highest paid service in the province, it really takes the control out of the municipality, so it might be a little bit of savings now if we were to switch, but unless it's a real significant amount of savings, you could get yourself in a scenario where you're switching for a savings right now, but then 5-10 years down the road, the OPP costs skyrocket due to other municipalities giving increases, and then the OPP has to match based on their contract, and we have no control but to pay the increase in costs. So I think it's important that we maintain some control, and we have two council members on the Timmins Police Service Board and plus one public member appointed by the mayor, so that gives us a good amount of control with what goes on in those negotiations and discussions, and I think that's the way we'll likely end up continuing, but we'll do our homework and look into the facts and then make a decision.
Diversification was also an issue that came up a number of times during the campaign. What will be your primary objectives on the economic development front early on in your term?
Well, I'm actually sitting down with Christy and Fred on Monday just to have our first initial talk. We're going to meet after I finish meeting with the councillors Monday afternoon, and we'll really discuss where things are going there. One of the things I do want to look into that I brought up throughout the campaign was a partnership with Kappas Casing and their power company and see if we can do something there to generate income into the municipality that they have. They're going to be generating $1.7 million for the community by 2017, and if we can make a similar investment and come up with a scenario that gives us some alternative revenue aside from the residential tax base, I think that's something we want to look into. But obviously there's a lot of talk about the forestry sector rebounding, but there is some policies that are really holding some of the companies back and making it difficult for them during that situation. So I think as a part of NEOMA and part of Phenom, all the municipalities in Northern Ontario will really be lobbying the provincial government to make some changes there and help the forestry sector come back to fruition in the way we used to have it. So we really had that two sector between mining and forestry really going well. Then we know that our communities are doing well and the rest of the business will follow. But diversification is important. We'll continue to work with the TDC. One of the other items I mentioned that I'd like to keep pushing for, and hopefully I can bring the rest of the northeastern municipalities on board, is to lobby for a full campus university here in Timmins. Obviously, northeastern Ontario doesn't have one, so I think it would be a great benefit to the whole region, not just Timmins, and hopefully we can work together and try and convince the province to let us have one, as I think we're probably the only of the 5 northern hubs that does not have a university in our city. So I think it's probably our turn there, and hopefully we can do some work and work something out.
Also, during the campaign, many people brought up a perceived lack of transparency at City Hall. What steps will you take to attempt to address this issue once you are sworn in?
Well, to be completely fair, I think government's probably as transparent as it's ever been. If you look at the rules for meetings now and having open meetings and making sure the public's able to attend them, there's no meetings in camera or out of the public's eyes unless they meet very specific criteria laid out by the province. So I think we're moving across the province to a time where transparency is there, but at the same time, when you look at things like social media and whatnot, the avenues to interact with the public is there, and that's really one of the things that I want to continue to do. Even this interview that you're doing today, it's an opportunity to really engage the residents and have those discussions with them and give them the chance to ask those questions. So that's the direction that I'd like to see. I've seen today that you have some interviews set up with some of the administration, starting with Joe Torlone in the near future too. So if they're on board and willing to do those and answer some of the questions the public has, I think it's a great opportunity really for our residents to become engaged and get the answers to the questions that they have. And I think that's really where I want to focus the openness and transparency, is just having that communication and constantly keeping the public aware of what's going on. And if they do have questions, give them the avenues to ask those questions and make sure they get the answers.
Well, that's it for this episode of Speaking of Timmins. I'd like to thank our guest, Mayor-elect Steve Black, for participating, and I'd like to thank you for listening to Speaking of Timmins.